that the key actors, are subscribing to peace. This is not the first time. Anytime you are running an election, the SSS will call you. You will always subscribe to peace and all that and all that. But we've seen these things don't work. Because the real people who are signing these things are not necessarily the ones. These things are done in their names, even when they don't know. Okay? Because you are asked to deliver your word. And perhaps you are not popular in that area. You want to rig. Because you can't rig successfully in a place you are not popular.
So does it mean that, are you suggesting that this accord that they've signed appears to be papering over cracks?
I'm very optimistic that they should walk the talk, okay? But it is not going to be very easy. You see, the culture of impunity reigns supreme in the domain of politics. If there are some 4 or 5 people doing rally or campaign in the name of a candidate that is very strong in that area, if they break your windscreen, there's nothing you can do about it. In fact, they can beat you up. The police cannot do anything. I don't know whether I get the point. If they arrest them, the following minute, they are out. So that's why when you see them rallying up on that, you better keep your way off. So the fact is that the culture of impunity is inherent in our politics. And it is because the winner takes all. Because there are no other engagements. So somebody is, like it's a do or die. I think Obasanjo captured it very well. It's just people are calling his name, but that's what our politics is. The man who had been a tailor all his life, the kind of small tailor, is not even a fashion designer. He becomes a local government chairman. Then you see him riding all the type of cars and house. So the other man wants to do it by force.
We will get more details from our correspondent in a moment, even Mr. Chukwuma Eze. But let me come back to Dr. Osintam. I mean, from what he said, the capacity you spoke about security forces also standing up to be counted, he says here that, look, before the contest, they have an interview with security. So how come that doesn't translate to ensuring that they all rein in their supporters?
Oh, yes, what Mr. Naji said is exactly the case. The character of our politics is constituted as warfare. That is because when you win all. And I tell you, there is a lot to be won. If you have a political office, what it means is that you have direct and sometimes unquestioned access to national treasury. And because we have very weak institutions, the checks and balances that ought to make you be responsible as a public official do not exist. So what you find is that people tend to get into office and they amass extensive financial wealth. Now, if this is an incentive to get into politics, people tend to do all that they can to possibly get into office. So I understand that. It is very inherent in the character of our politics, and which is why it's not surprising that since 1960, we've had only militants and ex-convicts and all kinds of people with dubious characters find politics very attractive, because that is where basically no qualifications are required in order for you to get there. But I suspect that the attitude is changing, and if politicians can make open declarations committing to non-violence, what we can hope is that not only should we take their commitment seriously, I think that the executive arm of the government exists for a reason. Their responsibility is to prosecute those who offend our laws. The president, in the course of last week or so, suggested that we might need more laws to prosecute electoral offenses. I think that we have more than sufficient laws in our books already. For instance, if you kill someone during elections, we have our laws forbid murder under any kind of circumstances. If you burn down people's cars, burn down people's properties, our laws forbid arson. So we do not need any specific set of new laws in order to prosecute people. What I think we need is, a greater prosecutorial responsibility. Okay. Let the government accept that, look, in spite of these public commitments that we have made towards non-violence, anyone who commits violence in the course of the political process will be prosecuted. And the government needs to rise to that challenge. Let
me get over to Chukwuemeka Eze. He's of the West African Network for Peace Building. He's been involved in peace initiative for as much as 15 years. Chukwuemeka, what can you tell us? What is it thinking? Having signed this agreement, you've been involved in perhaps cases such as this one, what was your thoughts? What went through your mind when you heard that politicians had signed this accord?
I think, first of all, is to acknowledge that the trajectory of violent elections in Nigeria is something that we need to look into very critically. When people begin to sign public declarations against electoral violence, I think what it means is that they are committing to whatever they are signing. And also the personality of the person that pushed for that signing is also something that we don't have to take with kid gloves. Somebody at the level of the former Secretary General of the UN is somebody that command enormous respect, and I expect that these politicians should abide by that. But like the gentleman in the studio said, we need to understand that elections are emotional in its nature, and therefore what can even reduce to a very great extent the level of violence is the credibility of the process, and then the fairness that is also associated with that. If you look at the indicators leading to this election, you will agree with me that these two issues may not have been satisfied. While it is true that INEC is beginning to gather a lot of credibility in terms of its personalities, in terms of process, I'm not sure it's the same thing, and yet people want to be commit to non-violent electoral process. These are spontaneous issues that once it happens, nobody is able to deal with them.
Let me jump in there, Chukwuemeka. I mean, what's the thinking? Because we had diplomats, Chief Emeka Anyoko was there, Kofi Annan, among several other Nigerian diplomats were also present while facilitating that meeting. Does perhaps where you are, maybe even in West Africa, are they getting the sense that, okay, if we have this caliber of people getting interested in the way Nigeria's elections pan out, does that send some sort of peace message across the West African coast and perhaps internationally as well, that who knows, these elections will eventually go a non-violent way?
Well, you need to also understand the strategic nature of Nigeria within the region and even on the continent. Nigeria is hosting the Economic Community of West African States and is also one of the big players within the peace and security arena of the continent. And therefore, whatever happens to Nigeria will have a mirror effect on the region. And God forbid, if Nigeria slide on the side of anarchy, then that means the whole region will be affected. The population of 170 million people is not something to joke with. But in some other countries, for example, in Ghana, where I am, you will understand that because the process is transparent, it reduces electoral tension. And that is the truth. When you have a system that encourages the printing of ballot papers, for example, involving all the political party agents, from that moment, people begin to see, transparency and begin to develop confidence on the electoral process. Once that is done, even the loser will lose fairly. The second thing is the faith that people have on the state institutions. Ghanaians or developed countries have faith in their state institutions. And that also means that if people lose election, they have the faith that the judiciary is going to provide them with redress. When there is no faith in the electoral process and there is no faith in the redress process, then people must go to the streets because that's the only language they now understand.
All right, thank you, Mr. Eze. Let's get back to the studio. Mr. Naji, speaking about getting party agents involved in, from what he says, even from as little as printing of ballot papers. We know that INEC speaks to electoral observers, they speak to politicians, they have regular parleys, including security. How will that play out? Will it help in dousing tension if, for instance, we adopt that model, involving them from almost at every level?
Involving the party
agents, political parties.
In printing ballot papers?
Just getting them to see how the process works, to ensure that, look, no hanky-panky going on here.
That's not the issue, Chamberlain. The issue is that there is a piece of meat and the dog is watching it. And you want to tell the dog how that meat came about. That's not necessary. The dog wants the meat.
So the process is irrelevant?
In fact, the process is irrelevant so long as they get the power. If you show them how the cards were printed and that like they said, it's 68.8 or something million, they showed you count it now to see that the things, they will always look for another ingenious way, you understand, to cut short the process to grab that meat. That is what the issue is.
All right, perhaps we'll also get to find out from you out there. How would you suggest that that process is followed through and through? We'll take a break now. We're back after the break. Join us again.